What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we are here to talk about something that I don't really want to talk about, but we need to talk about, and that is racism in the rock and metal scene. This is not a video that I really wanted to make, but there's a point where it becomes clear that you have to say something, and that point is now. And just to cut straight to the chase here, basically what I realized over the past maybe year and a half, 2 years since my channel has grown, is that racism is a much bigger issue in the scene than I thought it was. And that's a little bit embarrassing to admit, but you know, as an old white guy, obviously that's not something that I personally experience. And so it's easy for me to think that it's not an issue. And now I see that I was wrong. It is an issue and we need to talk about it. I will give you my thoughts as an old white person, but I also wanted to bring on my friend Myke C-Town to give you his experience. Myke has an awesome channel that primarily focuses on metal, but the way that I met him was way back in, I think it was 96 or 97, through the hardcore scene, like the Earth Crisis, Integrity, Snapcase kind of scene. I thought he would be the perfect guest to have on here because he comes from the hardcore scene like me, so we share that sort of point of view. But obviously, being black, he can talk about a side of it that I can't. So what exactly am I talking about? Well, as you guys know, I read all my comments, every single one of them, and I was genuinely shocked and distressed by the number of racist comments that I see. Like, I really had no idea that there were that many people that think this way. The first category is just straight up racist shit, like these. It's not ironic, I actually don't like Jews. Also, anti-Semitism is a slur made up by Jews to make racism against them seem more important. There's a whole lot of this kind of narrative of the Jews and or the media like conspiring to destroy white culture and force black culture on us. And the second category of people are the ones who basically make disdainful comments about like black culture and how it's synonymous with like ghetto or trash or something like that. Black people haven't created jack shit in music. Rock is all built on white instrumentation, white music theory, and white recording technology. Chuck Berry and Little Richard were stealing our culture. Black music doesn't even have harmony. The real reason whites are dying and POCs are thriving. I mean, gee, could this have anything to do with demographics? The whole, like, they're outbreeding us thing. And then the last category of comments is all the people who, anytime I have brought up racism in the rock and metal scene in other videos, there's a certain group of people who, A, gets really defensive, B, starts deflecting or minimizing or dismissing it like it's not that big of a deal. Few examples of that. This ain't it, brother. Black metal is so much more than what you're presenting. Using NSBM bands as a reason to dislike black metal is a cop-out, especially when you, of all people, know and have been critical of Nazi punk. There's a lot of comments like this, and I want to just quickly unpack this one. For anybody who doesn't know, NSBM is National Socialist Black Metal, and essentially what this person is saying is like, oh, big deal. Why are you focusing on the handful of bands that are Nazis? And by the way, there are Nazi punk bands too. Minimizing it by saying it's not that big of a deal, deflecting it by saying, well, what about this? A lot of whataboutism. NSBM is a small subgenre of the small subgenre of black metal, just like hatecore is. More minimizing, more deflecting, more whataboutism. That's just like a small portion of all the comments like that, and I don't know about you, but I was genuinely shocked that that stuff is as common as it is. Again, I think that kind of speaks to the fact that I am an old white guy, and I just was genuinely unaware of that, which is a little bit embarrassing, but that's why I'm making this video. And I have some thoughts on this, like what it means, why it's important, what we should do about it. But before we get into that, I'm gonna turn it over to Myke.
What's going on, people? Myke C-Town here. As a black man who came up in the punk and hardcore scene, I'm no stranger to racism. That's partly because racism was something that wasn't tolerated within the hardcore scene, so we spent a lot of time fighting it, but it's also because I dealt with a lot of low-key racism in the same scene. Situations where people thought if they were out in the streets fighting overt racism, then it was okay for them to make subtle racist comments. The same guys who were standing arm in arm with me protesting at Klan rallies were calling me token at shows. I knew what I was getting into when I got involved in the metal scene in the mid-90s. I dealt with a lot of shit, from being physically kicked, to being told to leave, to being threatened if I didn't go to the back of the venue. And I've been dealing with this shit for 25 plus years. And while things have definitely gotten better, that racist element is still there. And it boggles my mind when metal dudes attempt to deny it. 5 white guys sitting around saying that racism doesn't exist is like 5 tall guys telling the world that something that's on the top shelf is really easy to reach. Racism is a problem in general, so basic logic would say that it would be present within musical genres as well. Not just in rock and metal and country or anything else. None of those genres are special. They're part of the regular world, so naturally, the ills of the regular world would pervade those genres. It's all a question of to what degree. And honestly, I think racism is alive, well, and strong within metal. And I'm not just talking about NSBM, but I'm talking about across the board. Black metal, death metal, power metal, all of it. Now, that doesn't mean that I think metal as a whole supports and fosters racism. I'm just saying that it does exist, and it's definitely highly downplayed and ignored. And a large reason for that is a lot of people don't actually understand what racism is. Some of you think that you have to call someone a nigger in order to be considered racist, ignoring the subtle nuances that come with saying things like, "You're not like other black guys," or "You're one of the good ones." Those backhanded compliments can be just as detrimental as calling someone a slur straight out. But don't get it twisted, a lot of you love using slurs as well. And you're probably saying, well, metal is supposed to be about rebellion. Well, what's rebellious about racism? It's literally been around for at least thousands of years. Or you'll say, metal isn't a safe space. Well, if you're a straight white male, it certainly is. Where else can you feel safer? I see more of you complaining about Antifa than you do white supremacists. Why? Because Antifa affects you because they cancel your concerts or some of them physically attack you. But a lot of you don't say a word about Nazis doing the same shit to people who look like me because you don't have to personally deal with it. Sounds kind of selfish, doesn't it? When people complain about racism, y'all will be the first ones to say, keep politics out of metal, which is a ridiculous statement because politics have always been a part of metal. But that aside, are you telling the white supremacist bands to keep politics out of metal? Of course not. What this typically translates to is, I don't want to talk about anything that's going to make me feel personally uncomfortable or make me feel like an other, which ironically, a lot of times is what your black and brown peers are feeling. So the question becomes, do you think there's a problem with racism in general? If your answer is yes, then cool. Do you find these same issues prevalent in the genre that you love? If the answer is yes, and you actually care about this, then the new and most important question is, what are you going to do about it? Because this isn't about making you feel bad for being white or accepted. It's about understanding that this level and this system of inequality exists, and if you gave a shit about people and the genre, then it would be a good idea for all of us to have a conversation about it. So let's do that, and maybe we can come to some sort of solid conclusion. Because the larger metal gets, the more eyes it's going to have on it. So these discussions are going to be had with you or about you. It's your choice what happens from here out.
So to wrap this up, a couple thoughts. So first of all, why does this matter? If it doesn't directly affect me, why do I give a shit? Why am I making this video? Am I just an SJW, like virtue signaling to show everyone how woke I am? It's true that this does not affect me personally, but it does affect my viewers, it affects my friends, it affects my family. My cousin is black, his wife is Filipina and Mexican. My wife and her family are Vietnamese. The next generation of my family will have 0 white people in it. All of us are in mixed race relationships. So I care about this on a personal level because even though it doesn't affect me, it does affect my family and my future kids. Secondly, and obviously far less importantly, because we're just talking about music here, but if you're one of the people that cares about the future of rock and metal, then you need to care about this. Because this shit just will not fly. This will kill the genre. The future of global culture is not white. It's multicultural. Like, for example, in my video the other week about what killed punk, at the end of that, I shared a bunch of like pop and rap artists that I felt were doing the most exciting creative stuff. One of them out of, I don't know, probably 8 or 10, was a heterosexual white male, Ghostman. The rest of them were either black or Asian or Latino. Charlie XCX is Indian. Anybody who's potentially interested in rock and shows up and sees people like this, like talking about Jews inspiring to eliminate white culture, if I was one of those kids, I'd be like, all right, I can see that I'm not wanted here. I'm just gonna see myself out. Trust me, if this continues to be a part of rock and metal, it will kill the genre. So the big question is, what do we do about it? Well, to be honest, I'm not sure that I have all the answers, but I definitely don't think that cancel culture is helpful in most cases. Pointing out that somebody made an edgy joke 9 years ago when we know that person clearly is not actually racist, I don't think that's helpful. If anything, I think that makes people just like tune you out and ignore you. I think that all this stuff is rooted in ignorance. And that might sound obvious, but what I mean is the actual definition of the word ignorant, meaning that they literally don't know the people that they think they hate. because it's actually pretty hard to hate people that you understand. So what I would say is make a conscious effort to educate yourself about just different kinds of people in the world. Number one, put in a conscious effort to talk to and make friends with people who aren't like you in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, income, education, political beliefs. Like, put yourself out there and try to get to know people, even especially people that you think you wouldn't get along with. You might be surprised. I bet you'll find out that you have a lot more in common than you think. Also, ask yourself if you may have some unconscious bias, because I think a lot of us do. It's an uncomfortable question to ask, but I think that's the really important one. I think the vast majority of people in rock and metal are not explicitly racist. Like, I don't think there's people sitting in front of their computer like writing hateful essays full of slurs, but I do think there's a lot of people that have an unconscious bias that manifests itself in the way they react to certain things. For example, like I said, Cardi B, people get so angry anytime I mention her, and they're probably going to do it in the comments here. Just two of them here. I love Cardi B, dropped. Oof, as soon as you mentioned Cardi B, non-ironically, I lost respect in your point of view. And if you don't like her, that's fine, but I think we should ask ourselves, is it coincidence that people get unreasonably angry about this person who, admittedly, she is obnoxious, but she's not the only obnoxious person in the world. So is it a coincidence that they get exceptionally angry about her, a very vocal woman of color? Maybe. Or maybe it's also possible that these people have an unconscious bias where they find somebody like her threatening because she is a very vocal woman of color. And I'm not saying like if you don't like Cardi B, you're racist. That would be a stupid thing to say. But I am using that as an example of something that I see and a question that all of us, including myself, should ask ourselves, like, is it possible that I have some unconscious biases towards certain groups of people, whether that's black people or any other group? And if so, how does that feel? Probably not good, right? But to me, the answer to this is in coming together rather than calling each other out and making things even more divided than they are. I think the answer is in getting to know each other, in being genuinely interested in learning about other kinds of people. And then hopefully this kind of shit will just die on the vine. But again, that's just my opinion. One thing I absolutely hate is white people white-splaining racism, so I really don't want to be that person. So thank you to Myke for being part of this. I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments. Again, please keep it respectful. I know this is a delicate subject. I really want to show the world that you can have a discussion on the internet about this that is respectful and cool and solutions oriented. So let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you next time.